This part concludes the episode with Meleagrance, who has captured Guinevere and caused all sorts of problems throughout the land. And he's caused these problems primarily because he loves Guinevere. So he's sort of a rival for Lancelot. And he even says, I don't want to really capture Guinevere until I know Lancelot's out of the way. And so he tricks Lancelot at one point and he throws him into a dungeon, and Lancelot gets out by the love of a young lady who helps him, a nameless damsel who helps him out. And when he gets out, eventually he has a battle with Meleagrance where he decides to be handicapped, to take off half his armor and show that he can defeat him with one arm tied behind his back, as the phrase goes. So he does defeat him with one arm tied behind his back, and then he looks to the queen to see whether or not he should kill the man, take his life, because of course Meleagrance is begging. He's a coward at heart and doesn't want to die. And he looks to Guinevere, and Guinevere gives him the nod as though to kill him. Yes, you should kill him. And Lancelot at that point says, I don't know if I want to kill the man. And so he actually defies Guinevere's will. And he allows Meleagrance to fight him with that half his armor stripped away. So it's a more or less a fair fight. And even with half his armor stripped away, Lancelot defeats Meleagrance and chops him and kills the man. It's the end of Meleagrance. But there's this tension, I think, between Lancelot and Guinevere at this point, because they've been up to this point lovers and in accord with one another, and Lancelot's always been trying to do what Guinevere asks of him. And it does bring up something of the question of where's Arthur in all this? I mean, Arthur's right there watching this combat between Meleagrance and Lancelot. And in a similar way, Arthur's been there the whole time that Lancelot and Guinevere have been having their affair. So where is Arthur in all this? Is he mentally checked out? Is he concentrating on other things? It seems as though Arthur is a kind of guy who either won't stand up for his wife or can't. He doesn't know how. And he still considers Lancelot, to this point, to be the noblest and most virtuous of all knights. Well, that nobility and virtue of Lancelot is proven in the scene at the very end of this section with Sir Urre. Urre comes and he's wounded. He's got wounds all over his body, and he says, the best knight here will heal me. And so Arthur commands all of his knights to try and heal Sir Urre, to search his wounds, as it says. One knight after another comes up to search his wounds. And to make the point absolutely crystal clear, Mallory names every single knight that tries. So we get this long list of knights that would have tried the wound. But at the very end of it all comes Lancelot, and Lancelot is asked to heal Urre, and Lancelot's terrified. He is terrified to be found out as a fraud, because by this point, I really think there's something going on Mallory is trying to show us in the psychology of Lancelot. He's beginning to question whether or not his loyalty to Guinevere should be absolute. He's beginning to question himself as a knight. He's already failed at the Grail quest, and I think he's beginning to have doubts as to whether or not his dalliance with the Queen is a good thing, especially given his loyalty to Arthur. So when it comes time for him to heal Urre, what he's terrified of is that he's going to go and search the wounds of Urre and fail. He won't be able to search the wounds to heal this wounded knight. And consequently, he will be found out as a false knight himself. If he does not heal the wounds of Urre, he will not be the best knight, and therefore it will prove that he's a failure, he's a fraud, he's an imposter. And he's terrified of that, the shame that would carry. So when he goes to heal the wounds of Morte, he says, I don't want to do this. I really don't want to heal this guy's wounds. I'm afraid to do it. I don't consider myself the best knight. And Arthur says, do it. You're my knight. You're my right-hand man. Go and heal those wounds. So he does. And there's a great moment where he kneels down and he prays, not for himself, but for the recovery of this knight. The text looks like this. Then Lancelot held up his hands and looked into the east, saying secretly unto himself, Thou blessed Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I beseech thee of thy mercy, that my simple worship and honesty be saved, and thou blessed Trinity, thou mayst give power to heal this sick knight, by thy great virtue and grace of thee, but good Lord, never of myself. And it's really interesting here because Lancelot, up to this point, has been doing everything for glory and fame and for himself, and everything has been for his own acceleration, his own advancement. And for the first time, he's doing something, on the one hand, he's praying secretly. Nobody else is to hear this because he's terrified to be found out as a fraud. And he prays that God heal, through him, heal this knight who needs to be healed. But not for his own sake, he says, not for my sake, but for your sake, Lord, for you. I pray that this happen. It's the first time, really, in the work where Lancelot empties himself, where he negates his own pride and his own desire for glory and allows the Spirit of God to just move through him. Well, at that moment, and when he heals Ure, at that moment he becomes the Grail, which is a striking image. He becomes the vessel that holds the wine of God, the thing that empowers holy men to do what they do. No truly holy man is holy by his own power. A holy man is holy because he empties himself, and his self is negated, and the power of God moves through him. And Lancelot, up to this point, has not recognized that. So for the first time, partly out of his own shame, his own fear of being exposed, and partly out of this, I think, growing recognition that he is a mere mortal and that he has to give over to God, Lancelot empties himself for the first time, and he allows this power of God to move through him, and he heals Sir Ure, and all the knights are rejoicing, and this is a great event. But then it says this interesting line, and Lancelot wept like a young boy who has just been whipped. It's really striking because he's just overcome by emotion. He lets himself go at that moment and weeps for the sheer gratitude at the fact that he has been chastised by God. Not chastised as in whipped physically, but chastised as in shown that God is merciful and that this is the way to holiness. And I think it's this moment with Sir Uri that allows him then to progress through the civil war that occurs next to the very end of the work, where he grapples with his own mortality and failure.